Our next guest is a university professor, an entrepreneur, CPA, and veteran. He has a passion for helping families and youth develop their critical thinking and engage in calm, intelligent debate of important topics. Please welcome Tom Rowley. How are you this morning, Tom?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing wonderful. Now, your experience includes providing offshore tax consulting services and speaking to potential investors in Panama. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, anyone who has a business is dealing with managing risk. My offshore tax consulting is about how to manage tax risk. So, good idea for a lot of people to internationally diversify their investment portfolios. And a common thing is to go Panama or Costa Rica and buy rental property and put it in a corporation, perfectly legal. Only problem is you've created a foreign controlled corporation and you got a pile of paperwork you got to file. Last topic I did with a live presentation was titled Avoiding Expensive Mistakes. And in it, I explained that if you do that, you've created a beast called a controlled foreign corporation. You better have at least $2,000 worth of positive cash flow out of the business, because it's going to have to report to two governments, and the paperwork is ridiculous. If it's no risk, buy a good liability insurance policy, keep property in your own name.
I like that. Now, you are a former professor and you've published several books. What is the focus of your books and why did you write them?
Well, operating a business, you've got to be able to make effective decisions. And to make effective decisions, you need to learn to ask the right questions. I started writing the books because when I reacted to what was going on with the response to COVID, the decisions didn't make any sense. I was teaching critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills to my students, and there wasn't any evidence that anybody was using either of those to make the decisions that they made that impacted thousands of people around the world. So I did some research into what had happened to public education over the last two generations. Universities used to be a place of intellectual debate and discussion, not since the 70s. The outcome of the research was a book I wrote titled Blame It on Nom, How Education Became Indoctrination and What You Can Do About It. The goal of this particular book was to get people to become advocates to restore a couple of courses back into K through 12. The book traces from the 60s through the late 2000s all of the well-meaning federal legislation, and plus the influence of some special interest groups. All that's done is create a huge bureaucracy with a ton of paperwork, and students are not learning the rights and responsibilities of citizens, nor an accurate sense of American history. The second evolution of that book was a book that I wrapped around Blame It on Nom, and it's titled Empower Your Children. Teach kids to ask meaningful questions, recognize bias, and stand up for themselves. And it's aimed primarily at teachers, especially homeschool teachers, also coaches and mentors who interact with young people to get them to become what I call a respectful skeptic. Learn to politely ask questions to verify the validity of the information that you receive. You're basing your decisions on flawed, incomplete, or inaccurate data, the outcome is not likely to be what you expected.
Now, your bio also includes a legacy goal related to equine therapy. Can you tell me more about what this is and who can benefit from it?
This is a favorite of mine, and I share a short story with your audience. I'm standing in the middle of a 60-foot round pen. The stable master leads this beautiful golden brown horse into the ring that had never been ridden. And I was to get this horse to run around the perimeter to assess whether or not I was a risk or a threat. And I got the horse to run just my hands, no voice, 2 laps around and stop. And then 2 laps the other way, stop. And then I just dropped my hands to my sides and stood silent and still. The horse looked at me. He took one step towards me, then another, and I held my fist out to greet him. And he sniffed my hand, and he licked my fist. And I smiled, and I slowly turned my back on the horse, and stepped away towards the gate. And by the second step, I felt the horse's nose on my shoulder. That connection is the key to equine therapy. Building trust between a human and a 1,000-pound vegetarian that can't talk is how trained equine horse handlers and licensed mental health professionals can get trauma victims and special needs kids confident and productive in weeks, not years of therapy.
What does it mean to you when you see that connection with someone who has had PTSD, or for kids who possibly have learning disabilities and they get on that horse, but you finally see that connection? What does that mean to you?
I can only describe how it feels, which is difficult, but I can tell you what I see. Just yesterday, my wife and I volunteer at the McCormick Research Institute in St. Cloud, Florida. And I help lead horses. I'm an apprentice trainee. And there's kids who ordinarily won't talk to anybody. You pop them up and set them on the top of a horse, and they start to walk around, and they're doing exercises on the horses. And you should see the smiles on these kids' faces. And they'll look down and say, "What's your name? And how are you? And what do you do?" They talk to the horse. It's amazing. The veterans is a little different story, and I haven't had the privilege of being involved in the veterans treatment. I'm not a licensed therapist. But McCormick has a 10-year record of testing them when they start, and 12 weeks later testing them when they finish. And when they finish, they wouldn't qualify for the program. So it's amazing what they can accomplish.
It truly is.
There are also some parallels in a business about how you communicate and train a horse as to how you would train employees. Horses have no spoken language. And yet we can train a horse through repetition, through approach and retreat. And those same skills work with people.
How so?
And trust is essential to being a leader.
How so are they related?
Well, management is doing things the right way. Leadership is doing the right things. And your community, your employees, your neighbors, the vendors, your customers, they've all got to have confidence that as a business, you're going to provide the service or product that you offer at a fair price. And without trust, your employees aren't going to feel confident that what you train them to do or what you're doing with your business is a valid way for them to invest their time in it.
I know folks are going to want more information on where to find your books or even where to find you. How can they do that?
Well, I have a webpage, tomrowleybooks.com. There's links on it to where the books are offered. The paperback books are available at Amazon and in Kindle. We also, in addition to the first two books I talked about, we wrote, if you're going to help teachers, especially homeschoolers, I wrote a teacher's guide that summarizes in a half a dozen pages the idea of asking the right questions, and it gives them a nice layout for a lesson plan, plus a follow-up. And my wife, who happens to be a native Spanish speaker, translated the little sucker into Spanish. So it's available in 2 languages. You can get access to those through Amazon. There is also a hardcover book with a really pretty red, white, and blue cover on it. And that book is available through Barnes & Noble and Walmart's online bookstores.
Tom, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And we'll be right back.